It's me again, still trying to sell my book, which isn't available yet, so I'm just anticipating that date. I'm going to start off by giving you 6 reasons why you should not buy my book. And in fairness and equity, I will give you 6 reasons afterwards where you should buy my book. So let's start. If you are not interested in your own death, please put this book back most expeditiously. 2, if deep and continual introspection as to your own motives and behavior bore you to tears, don't even start. 3, if you are not at all interested in a microanalysis of both individual and group psychotherapy, stifle a yawn and get some rest. If philosophical discussions, together with mythology, Western literature, and poetry, turn you off while I cachinnate like an eldritch, spare the efforts. 5, if you think mental illness is just an attempt to fly from responsibilities, this book is not for you at all. If you feel that my style of writing is picking at navel lint, grandiose, chest-thumping, or exhibitionistic, probably you and I will not have a lot in common. Let me talk to the flip side of this discussion and tell you 6 reasons why you might want to read my book. Let me pause for one of my stories. I was teaching a class when a young woman got up in front of me and said adamantly, "You're so full of yourself." No one had ever said this to me before. So I paused for a moment and I said, "If I'm not filled with myself, with whom should I be filled by?" She looked at me and her eyes rolled so far into her head that I thought she was going to have a psychomotor seizure. At that point, she got up out of her chair and walked out of the room. So I still don't know how to answer that question. I'm so full of myself, any better than I did the first time. So that's a risk. 6 reasons why you should buy this book. If you enjoy vivid, atypical, vernacular writing, you may have found a home. Since I speak both as a scholar and as a kid growing up in the streets of Bedford Stuyvesant, and I pass and forth between 2 states effortlessly. If, as said by one of my readers of an earlier draft of this book, sometimes I feel your words are stripped from my soul, you may have found a home. If you love ambiguity, divergent thinking, ironies, and quixotic musings about human behavior, welcome aboard. If you know that laconic is the only word in the English language that comes to us directly from the Spartan language, because Lacan was the king of the Spartans, then I'm going to throw my arms around you because I found a friend. If you appreciate the fact that the masks of both tragedy and comedy are on the stage, the proscenium arch of the classical Greek theater, then you and I can relate to one another. If you are a fan of William Blake and can say, "Can I see another's woe and not feel sorrow too?" then we can get a box of tissues, sit next to each other, put our arms around each other for support, and shed tears together. And that's a product of my Russian patrimony. I was reflecting a lot about my reaction to the first YouTube that I made about 10 days ago. And I was caught by surprise by all the feelings that I had as a result of making that YouTube. I was talking about things that had happened to me many years ago, and I assumed naively that the emotional charge of these memories had been dissipated or covered over by the patina of time. Well, guess what? It wasn't true at all. The memories still had sharp emotional effects upon me. And I'm not embarrassed to say that in speaking about these memories, I felt myself close to tears several times. Now, looking at that dynamic more carefully, I realized that the memories were the same that I was talking about, but somehow they were softer. They were softer. The details were the same, but my understanding of what had happened to me when I was a child has changed and shifted dramatically toward the gentler side rather than the traumatic side. I don't know if that's a typical reaction as you get older, but it certainly was for me. Now, I want to talk about what it means to be an elder person in this society. Particularly in a therapeutic interaction, I am seen as the man, and I'm placed on a pedestal. There are at least 3 things wrong with being placed on a pedestal. I hate it. First of all, you have to posture as if you were throwing a javelin from the top of the pedestal. It's very physically uncomfortable. Trust me. Secondly, I know with a certainty that I will fall off the pedestal with a thud. Third, and perhaps most important of all, being fed what I call bogus food is not ego enhancing. It doesn't feed me. It doesn't nurture me. It's based upon transference phenomena, which are projections and have little to do with me, but have a lot to do with the person's need to see me that way. So it's not authentic. There's a Zen Buddhist saying that goes, "Seek not heroes, for you diminish yourself." I believe that implicitly. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this dynamic. I walked into a classroom for the first day of the class, and there were 4 Africans, not Afro-Americans, sitting in the front row, males. And they had their pectoral muscles pumped up, and they had grim expressions on their faces. I was taken aback because I didn't anticipate this. And they were posturing. And one class went by, 2 classes went by, and suddenly, by some system of accountability that I don't understand, I passed the test. And they relaxed, they were jovial, the great smiles broke out on their faces, and we kidded around and we laughed because I had been seen initially as the man, the authority figure. And since they shared a cultural history of slavery, I inherited that. And believe me, I felt it. So I do not want to be the sage on the stage. I do not want to be the guide on the side. I strive for a non-hierarchical interaction, even though I'm the man and I'm white, Anglo, with all these degrees after my name. That's inescapable. But what I do to diminish that profile, good luck. I laugh at myself all the time. And I hope that my laughter at myself levels the playing field. I hope it does. And many people, in response to my laughter, respond with laughter themselves. And that's glorious. I'm now going to unpack the word companion, because I love words. The word companion, in one of its rarer meanings, is composed of 2 parts. Com, which is together like compact or coordinate, and pane, which is the Latin word for bread. So what companion means in this context is breaking bread together. It's the oldest human ceremony, and it bonds people. Here's Spike, my buddy, right on cue to make his appearance on the camera. Hi, Spike. Make yourself comfortable. Now, let me say, go back to that classroom with the African males. There were 4 African women in the class. The women sat in the far back of the room. They never called attention to themselves in any shape, form, or manner. They treated themselves as if they were invisible. Never made a comment, and even didn't show very much expression on their faces. They were victims of a powerful patriarchy, culturally. However, and this is a big however, the African women, in their writings to me, because it was private and confidential, were glorious, with poetic images, with the beauty of language, with sharing stuff with me that was a privilege to read. But on the surface, none of that showed, not even close. So I'm very sensitive to the dynamic of being on a pedestal and have people make me something that I'm not. It makes me very uncomfortable because I know it's based upon a projection and doesn't truly reflect me. I want to unpack another word which simply fascinates me. The word is cryptomnesia. There are many writers who quote themselves having forgotten that they've written it earlier, or quote someone whom they've read at one time or another, but aren't aware that they've read it at one time or another, and it comes out as something they thought of. Where do these thoughts come from? My theory, as strange as it may sound, is as follows. All human knowledge exists over our heads as a cloud. And we simply access the cloud for these cultural, genetic, tribal, human memories that exist in this cloud. And we're all plugged into that. So where does the idea come from? It was there to begin with. At least that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. Now, the prototype of the hero who doesn't seek external guidance, but internal guidance, is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. I've read that book at least 5 times, each time gaining more insight into the meaning of it. Siddhartha does not have gurus. He's explicitly rejected them. And he sits by the bank of the river and watches the water flow. The river water flows down to the sea, and it joins the ocean, which in my patrimony is Mother Russia. So there's no external point of reference. It's all inside of him. So let me talk about people who walk their talk. They're not gurus. They're not shamans where people hang on to their every word. They're not cult leaders. These are people who have a message, an important message, but the message is based upon their own learning. It comes from inside of them, and they engage in the magic of self-disclosure. They talk about themselves, and you can identify with them, their journey, their particular style, or not, but they're not selling anything. They don't want to enlist you in their army, and I deeply respect them. Who are they? I can quote you some examples. First of all, Carolyn Hax, H-A-X, who writes an advice column for the Washington Post. Whenever she offers advice to a correspondent, she talks about what the advice that she's offering meant to her. And it's so grounded and authentic because for that moment, she's a companion. And you're joined together, not hierarchically, but as a part of human experience. Cheryl Stryer is another wonderful example. Cheryl Stryer walks the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada, over 4,000 miles. And she learns something about herself, and she shares it with other people. You can blow it off, saying, what does that have to do with my life? But be careful, because she's talking about herself at a deeply intimate moment. Shirley MacLaine walks the road to Campobello, to that magic spot in Spain. It takes her many, many days, and it's very arduous. But she doesn't tell us what we need to learn from her experience. She tells us what she learned from the experience. And it's transformational. It's just beautiful. Mary Karr, Karr, writes a book called The Liars Club, which talks about her dysfunctional family. She's been there. She's paid her dues. This is not an exhortation or a shame-inducing exercise. She tells us about herself, the painful details of herself. I have a dear mouse pal called Spike Gillespie. I read a column by Spike Gillespie in the Washington Post, and I wrote her a fan note because she talks about her dysfunctional relationship with her father, and believe me, it was dysfunctional, and how, as she's grown up, she's learned to forgive him. This is not theory. This is not La La Land. This is a human being who shares her pain with us. So I've written to Spike Gillespie many times. I've never met her. I wish I can, but she exists in my mind as an example of what I'm talking about. I want to speak about authors, some more authors, whom I feel eloquently illustrate the point I'm trying to make. Some of these are tricky. Ambrose Bierce and the Devil's Dictionary is wrested from his heart. It's bitter, it's cynical. There is no one as disillusioned as a former idealist. So that's where he's coming from. H.L. Mencken, the editor of the Baltimore newspaper, was a confrontive man, but coming once again from his own experience. O. Henry is blown off by most wannabe highbrow thinkers. That's a mistake. If you want to read O. Henry at his very finest, read A Reformed Reformation, a short story by him. If you want to understand, and of course, The Gift of the Magi, which is just priceless and a classic, and deserves to be, because it has, once again, to do with companionship. My favorite author on this list is Mark Twain. His stories have bite in them. They're not lightweight, in spite of what you may think superficially, but they grow on me. They grow on me with lengthening shadows of meaning. So I hope I haven't overwhelmed you with a reading list. But if you will, read these books for your own profit, not to seek a hero, but to help you understand yourself. And that's the wish that I want to leave with each one of you. Thank you for inviting me into your life. Stay tuned for further developments.